A 13-year-old girl got slapped in court for telling the truth, but what her mom did next left the entire room silent. You ever been in a room so quiet you could actually hear your own heartbeat? That's how it felt in that courthouse in Springfield, Missouri, the morning 13-year-old Talia Monroe stood up to speak. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor, and you could tell she was trying to look brave. Shoulders squared, chin lifted, but her small hands twisted at the edge of her jacket. Everyone was watching her. Reporters, local parents, even kids from her middle school sitting with their moms in the back row. The case had already split the town in half. People were arguing at diners, at church, even outside the school gates, all over something as simple as a stolen backpack from the local convenience store. But here's the twist. Talia wasn't the one on trial. Her best friend, Darnell Brooks, was. He was 12, quiet, respectful, never caused a problem in class. The kind of kid who carried his homework in a folder so it wouldn't wrinkle. Yet somehow, the police said he'd snatched a backpack filled with electronics. Talia knew the truth. She'd seen what really happened that day, and as scared as she was, she'd made up her mind. She was going to say it in front of everyone. The courtroom air felt heavy, like even the walls were listening. The judge, Harold Benton, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He was tapping a pen on his notepad, probably trying to keep things moving. On the right side of the room sat Sergeant Paul Henders, the officer who made the arrest. He was broad-shouldered, buzz-cut hair, and the kind of man who never admitted he might be wrong. He stared at Talia like she was a problem he wanted to erase. The prosecutor leaned toward the microphone. "Miss Monroe," he said, his voice echoing, "you understand that you're under oath." Talia nodded. Her voice was tiny when she said, "Yes, sir." "Good," he continued. "Can you tell the court what you saw on March 5th outside Bryant's Market?" Talia's eyes flickered toward Darnell, who sat at the defense table with his mom, clutching a tissue. Then she looked at the officer. "I saw who really took the bag," she whispered. People shifted in their seats. The officer's jaw clenched. The judge straightened a little. "You saw who took it?" the prosecutor repeated. "Yes, sir." "And was it the defendant, Darnell Brooks?" Talia's throat went dry. For a moment, she just stared down at her shoes. You could almost feel her fighting her own nerves. When she finally looked up, her voice trembled, but came out clear. "No, it wasn't him." The courtroom fell silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop humming. The prosecutor frowned, flipping through his papers, but Talia kept going. "I saw the bag," she said, "and I saw a grown man, put it in Darnell's hands right before the officer came." "Are you sure?" the prosecutor pressed. "Yes, sir. I was right there." Sergeant Henders shifted in his chair, eyes narrowing. You could feel his frustration rising, like a wave waiting to crash. The judge cleared his throat. "Sergeant Henders," he said slowly, "this child's testimony. Does any of this sound familiar?" The officer forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is a 13-year-old girl. Kids make mistakes. They think they see things they don't." The way he said it, sharp, dismissive, made something twist in the pit of your stomach. But Talia didn't back down. She looked right at him and said, "I know what I saw." For a second, the entire room froze. The words hung there, small but powerful. Even the judge seemed surprised, but something about that truth hit the wrong nerve. The way the officer looked at her changed, like a switch flipping from irritation to something darker. You have to understand something about Springfield, Missouri. It's one of those towns where everybody knows everybody. The kind of place where news doesn't travel by newspaper, it travels through whispers in grocery store aisles and over coffee at the diner on East Chestnut. By the time Talia took the stand, her name had already been passed around like a rumor. "That Monroe girl's stirring up trouble," some said. Others called her brave. But most people, they just wanted her to stay quiet. Outside the courthouse that morning, local TV vans lined the curb. Reporters waited, pens ready, like hawks watching a mouse cross an open field. Inside, Talia sat at the witness table, feet barely touching the floor, and tried to focus on her folded hands. Her mother wasn't there, at least not yet. Everyone knew Camille Monroe worked overseas, but no one really knew what she did. People said she was some kind of government contractor. Nobody guessed the truth. At the defense table, Darnell's mom, Ms. Brooks, was quietly praying, her lips moving without a sound. Her son kept his eyes down, his shoulders tight. He hadn't spoken once since the trial began. The judge asked the bailiff to pass Talia a glass of water. She took a small sip, hands trembling. You could see the weight she carried, not just the fear of speaking, but the burden of knowing people didn't want to hear her truth. "Miss Monroe," said the defense attorney, a tall woman with tired eyes named Leah Porter, "you said earlier that you saw a man give Darnell the backpack. Could you describe that man?" Talia hesitated. "He was wearing a police uniform," she said softly. The whole courtroom gasped. Officer Henders' chair creaked as he leaned back, crossing his arms. He gave a sharp laugh that didn't sound friendly at all. "Now that's ridiculous," he said. "She's confused." The judge raised his hand. "Sergeant, let her finish." Talia's voice wavered, but she didn't stop. He put the backpack in Darnell's hands and said something like, "Hold this." Then a few seconds later, he yelled that Darnell stole it. For a moment, even the judge didn't know what to say. From the back row, someone muttered, "She's lying." Another voice whispered, "That poor kid." The crowd shifted, whispering, shaking their heads. It felt like the whole town was sitting in judgment, not just of the boy, but of her. Talia glanced at the jury. Some looked sympathetic, others skeptical. One woman had her arms crossed, lips tight, like she'd already made up her mind. The defense attorney spoke carefully. "So you're saying Sergeant Henders was the one who—" Before she could finish, Henders slammed his hand on the table. "This is nonsense," he barked. "She's just a kid trying to protect her little friend." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Order in the court!" Talia flinched at the sound, but she didn't cry. She just stared at the officer, her small voice breaking the silence again. "I'm not lying." There was a long pause. You could feel it, the tension thick in the air. The judge rubbed his forehead. "Miss Monroe," he said, "do you understand the seriousness of what you are claiming?" "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but her eyes stayed steady. The judge nodded slowly. "Very well. Continue." But on the other side of the room, Henders was already seething. You could see his hands clench, his jaw tightening, his pride unraveling one word at a time. And from that moment, it wasn't just a testimony anymore. It was a threat to his reputation, to his authority, and to the lie he'd built around an innocent boy. But Talia didn't realize yet how dangerous truth could be when it's spoken in front of the wrong person. The longer Talia sat there, the more it felt like the walls were closing in. The smell of coffee from the break room mixed with the faint scent of old paper and floor polish. Every sound, the shuffle of a notepad, the creak of a chair, felt magnified. She tried not to look at Sergeant Henders, but it was hard. His stare had weight. "Go ahead, Miss Monroe," the defense attorney said gently. "Take your time." Talia took a deep breath. "I was walking home from school," she began. "Darnell was with me. We stopped at Bryant's Market to get chips. Then I saw the police car pull up. Leah Porter leaned forward. "Did you recognize the officer?" "Yes," Talia said. "Him." She pointed at Henders. He smirked. "You sure about that?" he said under his breath, loud enough for everyone to hear. The judge shot him a look. "Sergeant, you'll remain silent unless spoken to." "Yes, Your Honor," he said through gritted teeth. Talia continued, her voice trembling but clear. "He got out of the car and asked who the backpack belonged to. Darnell said it wasn't his, but the officer kept asking. Then he told Darnell to hold it. When Darnell did, he grabbed him." Ms. Porter frowned. "To clarify, you're saying Sergeant Henders gave Darnell the backpack before accusing him of stealing it?" "Yes." A wave of murmurs rippled across the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel again. "Quiet." Henders was breathing hard now, his fingers drumming on the table. You could see the veins in his neck tightening. The prosecutor stood up. "Objection, Your Honor," he said quickly. "This witness is a child. Her testimony is inconsistent and unsubstantiated. She could have misunderstood the situation entirely." The judge turned to Talia. "Miss Monroe, do you have any evidence of what you saw?" Talia hesitated, then said, "There's a camera outside the store." That changed everything. The courtroom buzzed with low voices. Even the judge looked surprised. "There's footage?" he asked. "I think so. It's right above the door." The prosecutor frowned, flipping through his notes. The footage was reported as unavailable. Unavailable. Leah Porter repeated. Or missing? He didn't answer. Talia bit her lip. I saw the red light blinking, she said. It was recording. The silence that followed was heavier than before. The judge leaned back in his chair, glancing at Henders. Sergeant, he said slowly, do you recall whether the store camera was operational? Henders's eyes flickered, just for a second. Not to my knowledge, Your Honor. But that single flicker didn't go unnoticed. From the defense table, Ms. Porter wrote something on her notepad and slid it toward her assistant. The paper said one word, check. Talia swallowed hard. She could feel her heartbeat again, loud in her ears. The judge called for a short recess, saying he needed to review some evidence. As people stood and shuffled toward the exit, Talia stayed seated, frozen. Officer Henders walked past her table on his way out. He didn't say a word, but as he passed, he muttered just low enough for her to hear, You should have kept quiet. Talia's stomach dropped. She didn't know what to say, so she just stared at the floor. Her small fingers clenched around the edge of the witness table until her knuckles turned white. But even then, even with her fear pressing down on her, something inside her refused to break. She knew what she saw, and she wasn't taking it back. When the recess ended, the judge returned with a tighter expression. All right, he said, we'll proceed. The prosecutor called Talia back to the stand. His tone had changed now, less polite, more probing. Miss Monroe, he said, pacing slowly, you've said a lot of serious things today. Do you understand that lying in court can lead to punishment? Yes, sir, she said. So you're standing by your claim that Sergeant Henders placed the backpack in the defendant's hands before accusing him? Talia looked straight ahead. Yes, because that's what happened. The prosecutor leaned in, voice low and firm. And you're not just saying this because Darnell is your friend? Her eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. No, I'm saying it because it's the truth. The judge watched quietly, his fingers tapping the gavel handle. Across the room, Henders's face turned red. You could tell he was about to explode. But what nobody realized was that the worst moment of the day hadn't even happened yet. It was still building, just beneath the surface. The afternoon sun leaked through the tall courthouse windows, cutting strips of light across the wood-paneled walls. Everything felt still, too still, like the entire room was holding its breath. Talia sat back down in the witness chair, her shoulders trembling slightly, but she never looked away from Sergeant Henders. The judge motioned for everyone to continue. Let's proceed, he said. The prosecutor walked slowly toward her. Talia, he said, his voice smooth but sharp underneath, you've told us that Sergeant Henders handed Darnell the backpack before accusing him. But you're 13. Do you really think you understand what you saw that day? Yes, sir, she said. I understand. He smiled, a condescending smile, and turned toward the jury. She's young. Impressionable. Sometimes children mix up details. It's not lying, it's confusion. Talia's voice cut through the air, trembling but strong. I didn't mix it up. That sentence hung there. People turned to look at her. She wasn't yelling, but her tone had a firmness that caught everyone off guard. Officer Henders shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. His hands gripped the armrest, like he was trying to keep himself from doing something. The prosecutor cleared his throat. No further questions, he said. The judge nodded. Thank you, Miss Monroe. You may... Actually, Henders interrupted, standing suddenly. Your Honor, may I ask the witness a question? The judge looked unsure. Sergeant, that's not standard procedure. It'll just take a second, Henders insisted. Just one question. The judge hesitated, then sighed. One question. Henders stepped closer to the stand. He didn't even look at the judge. His focus was entirely on Talia. You said, he began, his tone controlled but heavy, that you saw me hand over that backpack, right? Talia nodded, voice small. Yes, sir. Funny, he said, tilting his head, because nobody else saw that. Not one person. Not the store owner, not the customers, not even your little friend. I was there, she said softly. He took another step closer. And you're absolutely sure? Yes. You're calling me a liar then? She hesitated, but she didn't look away. If that's what it means to tell the truth. A low murmur spread across the courtroom. Someone whispered, "She's got guts." Another said, "She's crazy." Henders' face darkened. "You're saying I lied in my report? That I framed that boy?" Talia's voice cracked. "Yes." And that was it. The breaking point. Before anyone could react, Henders slammed his hand down on the witness table and leaned in close. "You don't know what you're talking about," he shouted. His voice echoed through the courtroom, bouncing off the walls. The judge pounded his gavel. "Sergeant, that's enough." But Henders wasn't hearing him. His face twisted with anger. Not the kind that passes quickly, but the kind that explodes after being bottled up too long. He raised his voice again, spitting his words like they were poison. "You think you can come in here, make up stories, and ruin a man's career?" Talia's lip quivered. "I didn't make anything up." The judge stood, shouting, "Sergeant Henders, step back." But he didn't step back. He took one more step forward, and in one horrifying instant that nobody could have imagined, his hand shot across the table. The sound of the slap cracked through the courtroom like a whip. Gasps filled the air. The room froze. Talia's head snapped to the side, her cheek instantly turning red. For a second, she didn't even move. She just sat there, wide-eyed, the imprint of his hand clear against her skin. The bailiff dropped the folder he was holding. The judge's mouth hung open. Nobody moved. Leah Porter was the first to react. "Oh my God!" she screamed, rushing toward Talia. "He hit her!" "He hit her," the judge shouted. "Bailiff, get him out of here!" The bailiff grabbed Henders by the arm, but he resisted, his face twisted in fury. "She's lying." "You don't understand." The bailiff shoved him back. "Enough, Sergeant!" The courtroom erupted into chaos. People were shouting, reporters were scrambling for their phones, and somewhere in the crowd, someone yelled, "Arrest him!" Talia sat still, her breathing shallow, one tear slipping down her cheek. Miss Porter knelt beside her. "Talia, sweetie, look at me." "Are you okay?" Talia didn't answer. Her small hands clutched the edge of the seat, her body frozen. The judge called for an emergency recess, slamming his gavel over and over. "Clear the courtroom! Now!" The crowd poured out through the double doors, leaving behind a room that felt like the air had been punched out of it. Henders struggled against the bailiff, yelling, "I didn't mean to. She was lying." "You can't." But his words didn't matter anymore. Nobody was listening. And just when it seemed like everything was falling apart, when the last of the noise faded and the courtroom sat in stunned silence, the heavy doors at the back creaked open, every head turned. A tall woman stepped inside, dressed in black, her heels echoing across the floor. Her face was calm, but her eyes told a different story. Because when Camille Monroe walked into that courtroom, every single person in that room knew the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The air inside the courtroom seemed to freeze the moment Camille Monroe stepped through the doors. The whispers died instantly. Even the reporters, who had been ready to record every second of the chaos, lowered their cameras as if something about her presence demanded respect. She wasn't wearing a uniform, but there was something unmistakable about her. A quiet authority, a sharpness in her posture. Her black blazer was buttoned neatly, her ID badge clipped to her belt, the faint outline of a communication earpiece still behind her hair. She had just stepped off a plane, still carrying the faint smell of jet fuel and rain. Talia didn't see her mother at first. She was sitting on the witness chair, trembling, her cheek glowing red from the slap. The defense attorney was still by her side, gently trying to get her to breathe. But when Camille saw her daughter's face, that bruise forming beneath her eye, her calm shattered for half a second. "Who hit my daughter?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the courtroom like a gunshot. Everyone turned. The bailiff stammered, "Ma'am, please." Camille's eyes locked on Sergeant Henders, who was still half restrained by another officer, his face drained of color. "You did," she said quietly. Henders swallowed hard. "Ma'am, Camille walked forward slowly, each step measured, deliberate. "You slapped a child," she said, voice steady, "in a courtroom." In front of a judge, the judge finally found his words. "Ma'am, I understand your anger, but—" "Your Honor," Camille interrupted, eyes never leaving Henders. "With all due respect, that man assaulted a minor while she was under oath. My daughter," the judge looked uncomfortable. We'll be handling this internally. The bailiff has already... Internally? Camille repeated, her tone low but laced with disbelief. My daughter was assaulted by a police officer in front of half this town, and you're calling it internal? The judge didn't respond. Talia looked up, her eyes wide. Mom? She whispered. Camille softened immediately. She crossed the room, kneeling in front of her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Hey, baby, she said gently. You okay? Talia nodded, but her lip trembled. He hit me. Camille's jaw tightened. I saw... She stood up slowly, turning back to the officer. Take off his badge, she said flatly. The bailiff blinked. Ma'am, I don't... I said take it off. Her tone changed. Not shouting, but firm enough to make even the judge fall silent. Something about the way she spoke made it clear she wasn't just any parent. Henders tried to speak. I didn't mean... She provoked me. Camille stepped closer, just enough for him to feel her presence. You think a 13-year-old telling the truth provoked you? She asked. That's your excuse? He said nothing. His lips parted, but no words came out. She studied him for a moment, her voice calm again, but colder than before. You ever serve overseas, Sergeant? He hesitated. No. I have, she said. And let me tell you something. I've seen men lie under oath. I've seen men crumble under guilt. But I've never seen anyone so desperate to keep a secret that he'd hit a child to protect it. The courtroom was dead silent. Camille took a deep breath, forcing herself to steady her anger. She looked at the judge again. You'll want to check the store's surveillance files. I have a feeling they're not as missing as the report says. The prosecutor spoke up, voice trembling slightly. Mrs. Monroe, are you suggesting... I'm not suggesting, Camille said, cutting him off. I'm telling you. You're looking at a cover-up. Reporters outside were pressing their faces against the glass, cameras flashing. Word had already begun to spread. The story was no longer about a stolen backpack. It was about a police officer who lost control and a mother who wasn't about to let it slide. The bailiff finally escorted Henders out of the courtroom, his wrists restrained. His face was red, his eyes full of something between fear and regret. As he passed Camille, she leaned in just enough for him to hear her whisper, You picked the wrong girl. He didn't respond. Talia stood up from the chair, still shaken, and Camille wrapped an arm around her. You did the right thing, she whispered in her ear. I'm proud of you. Talia's voice cracked. I was scared. Camille smiled faintly. That's how you know it mattered. The judge cleared his throat awkwardly, adjusting his glasses. We'll take another recess, he said quickly. Court will resume after order is restored. People began filing out slowly, still whispering, still watching the two of them. Talia leaned into her mother's side, holding on tightly, and in that quiet moment, as the courtroom emptied and the chaos faded into muffled echoes, the balance of power shifted completely. But Camille knew this wasn't over yet. The slap wasn't the end. It was the start of something much bigger. When court resumed an hour later, the atmosphere had changed completely. The air wasn't just tense anymore, it was electric. Everyone knew what had just happened wasn't going to disappear quietly. Reporters had crowded outside the courthouse steps, news vans lined the block, and people from all over Springfield were gathering with signs demanding justice for Talia Monroe. Inside, Talia sat beside her mother at the defense table. Her cheek was still red, but the trembling had stopped. Camille had one hand resting gently on her daughter's shoulder, the other gripping a file folder she hadn't shown anyone yet. The judge cleared his throat. This court has reconvened to address several matters. Firstly, the conduct of Sergeant Paul Henders. Camille stood. Your Honor, she interrupted, voice firm. Before we address conduct, I'd like to address evidence. The judge blinked. Mrs. Monroe, this isn't standard procedure. Neither is slapping a child in your courtroom, she replied calmly. But here we are. The room went silent. Even the bailiff stopped moving. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. Go on. Camille stepped forward, sliding the folder across the bench. This is footage from Bryant's Market, March 5th, 3:42 p.m. It's the exact time my daughter said the incident happened. The prosecutor's head snapped up. That footage was reported as missing. I know, Camille said, because someone signed off on removing it. The judge frowned. How did you get this? She met his gaze. Let's just say I have friends who know how to find what's been erased. No one needed her to say where she worked. The confidence in her voice said it all. The judge nodded slowly and gestured for the clerk to play the footage. The room went dark as the video appeared on the projection screen. The grainy camera angle showed the front of Bryant's Market. A few people were walking by. Darnell stood near the door, holding his backpack. Then Sergeant Henders' patrol car pulled up. He stepped out, talking on his radio. The whole courtroom leaned forward. The officer approached Darnell, said something, and then, clear as day, he handed the boy a black backpack. A few seconds later, he turned to the camera and shouted, "Stop! Thief!" before grabbing Darnell by the collar. The room erupted. People gasped. One woman started crying. The prosecutor's face drained of color. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order! Order!" Camille crossed her arms. "That's the truth. My daughter was punished for speaking." The prosecutor stammered, "Mrs. Monroe, this is unbelievable." "No," she said coldly. "This is America. And I want to know how a video that could have proven a child's innocence just vanished from evidence." The defense attorney, Miss Porter, stood, her voice shaking. "Your Honor, at this point, the defense moves for a full dismissal of charges against my client. The evidence clearly supports the witness's testimony." The judge nodded, looking pale. "Motion granted." He banged the gavel again. "Case dismissed." Darnell's mother burst into tears, clutching her son. People clapped, cried, shouted, "Thank you!" But Camille didn't smile. She wasn't celebrating. Her eyes were locked on the prosecutor and the few remaining officers in the room. "Someone covered this up," she said quietly, "and I'm going to find out who." The judge started to say something, but he caught the look in her eyes, the kind of look that made grown men second-guess their next words. Talia looked up at her mother. "Mom, are you in trouble for getting that video?" Camille smiled softly. "Not as much trouble as the people who tried to hide it." Reporters were waiting in the hallway, flashing cameras and shouting questions. Camille shielded Talia with her arm as they stepped out. "Mrs. Monroe, is it true you're with the CIA?" someone shouted. Camille didn't answer. She just kept walking. Talia held on tighter. "Everyone's looking at us," she whispered. "Let them," Camille said quietly. "Sometimes the truth needs an audience." They walked down the courthouse steps together, the crowd parting around them. Flashbulbs popped, microphones reached toward her, but Camille didn't stop until they were at her car. She opened the door for Talia, then turned back toward the courthouse one last time. Inside those walls, men were scrambling. Officers whispering, lawyers panicking, reputations collapsing. But Camille wasn't interested in revenge. Not yet. She wanted something deeper. Accountability. As she started the car, Talia turned to her, voice barely a whisper. "You're not mad at me, right?" Camille looked at her, surprised. "Mad at you?" "Baby, you did what most adults can't. You told the truth when it mattered most." Talia's eyes welled up again. "It hurt, Mom." "I know," Camille said gently. "The truth usually does." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence. Then Camille reached over, squeezing her daughter's hand. "You remember what I used to tell you when you were little?" Talia nodded slowly. "That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you're scared." Camille smiled. "Exactly." The car pulled away, leaving behind flashing lights and reporters shouting questions that no one could answer. Not yet, anyway. But deep down, Camille knew the story wasn't finished. The cover-up ran deeper than one corrupt officer, and she was just getting started. By the next morning, the story had exploded across national news. The headline read, "Police Sergeant Assaults 13-year-old Witness. Evidence Reveals False Arrest." Springfield wasn't used to that kind of spotlight. Protesters gathered outside the police department, demanding answers. Talk radio hosts debated it non-stop. For the first time, the town's secrets weren't staying buried. Inside her small kitchen, Camille sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. News clips played back the slap in slow motion, over and over again. Her jaw clenched every time she saw it, not because she couldn't handle it, but because she hated knowing her daughter had been treated like that. Talia sat beside her, wearing one of Camille's oversized sweatshirts. "Are they still talking about it?" she asked. Camille nodded. "They will for a while." "Are they mad at me?" Camille looked up. "No, baby. They're mad at what happened. And that's not the same thing, Talia hesitated. Mom, are you gonna do something? Camille exhaled. I already am. Before Talia could ask what she meant, a knock came at the door. When Camille opened it, Chief Raymond Holt, the police chief of Springfield, was standing there, hat in his hands, expression heavy. Mrs. Monroe, he said quietly, may I come in? She stepped aside, but her eyes stayed sharp. That depends, she said. Are you here to apologize or to make excuses? He looked down. Maybe both. Camille folded her arms. Then you can start with the first one. Chief Holt sighed. What happened yesterday? It was unacceptable. I've already put Henders on administrative leave. Internal Affairs is involved. Administrative leave? She repeated. He assaulted a child. I understand. No, she cut in, voice low and steady. You don't. You didn't see her face when it happened. You didn't hear the sound it made. Holt looked ashamed. Mrs. Monroe, I've been in this job 30 years. I've seen things go bad before, but this was different. It's like he snapped. Camille nodded slowly. You're right. He did. But people don't just snap like that without a reason. He hesitated. What are you implying? She leaned forward. That your department's been hiding more than one bad report. And I think you know it. Holt's face hardened. You can't accuse us of that without proof. Camille smiled slightly. Who said I don't have proof? She walked to the counter, pulled a small flash drive from her pocket, and handed it to him. Every deleted file from Bryant's market security system, along with 3 internal memos written by your officer, claiming he'd confiscated evidence that didn't exist. Holt took the drive, staring at it. How did you get this? Let's just say the CIA doesn't like dirty cops either, she said. He blinked. You're serious? I'm always serious. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Holt said quietly, You just started a war, Mrs. Monroe. She didn't flinch. No, I ended one. The war started the moment your officer thought he could silence a little girl for telling the truth. The chief nodded slowly. I'll make sure the right people see this. Do that, she said, and make sure you remember what side you're on when this hits Washington. He left quietly, the door closing behind him. Talia, who'd been listening from the hallway, walked in. Mom, what's going to happen now? Camille turned, kneeling down so she was eye level with her daughter. Now, people are going to have to choose, she said softly. They'll either protect the truth or protect their comfort. Talia looked unsure. That sounds scary. It is, Camille said, but it's necessary. Later that night, Camille sat alone at the kitchen table, staring out the window as rain pattered softly against the glass. She pulled out her phone, opened a new contact labeled Director Nolan, Langley HQ, and typed a short message. Evidence secured. Small-town cover-up confirmed. Proceeding carefully. For my daughter's sake. She hit send and sat back, letting out a long breath. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like an agent, or an investigator, or a strategist. She just felt like a mom. A mom trying to make sure her child never had to be afraid of the truth again. Upstairs, Talia was already asleep, the faint sound of her breathing drifting down the hall. Camille stood quietly in the doorway, watching her daughter rest. Brave girl, she whispered. You changed everything. But outside that peaceful home, power was shifting. Someone high up didn't like that a CIA agent had exposed one of their own. And Camille knew, deep down, this was far from over. By the end of that week, Springfield wasn't the same town anymore. The courthouse that once sat half empty was now surrounded by cameras and protest signs. The same benches where people used to gossip about football scores now held citizens demanding change. And for the first time, people were talking about something real, about truth, power, and accountability. Talia Monroe had become a name people recognized. Reporters called her the girl who stood up. Strangers mailed her letters of support. Kids at school whispered her name in the hallways, some with admiration, some with confusion, others just trying to make sense of it all. But inside her house, Talia wasn't thinking about fame. She was sitting at the kitchen table again, drawing quietly in a notebook, trying to feel normal. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a soft pink, but her eyes still carried something deeper, a kind of strength most people don't earn until much later in life. Her mother walked in, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "You've been quiet today," Camille said softly, setting one down in front of her. Talia shrugged. "I don't like when people keep asking me about it." "That's because it's still fresh," Camille said, sitting down. "But one day, you'll understand how powerful that moment was." Talia looked up. "Why?" "It just feels like everyone's fighting now." Camille smiled sadly. "That's what happens when truth shows up. It doesn't make people comfortable. It makes them choose who they are." Talia thought for a second, stirring her drink. "Are they going to fire that officer?" Camille nodded slowly. "He'll face charges, and not just for what he did to you." "Good," Talia said quietly. "He shouldn't be allowed to hurt anyone else." Camille reached across the table, resting her hand on her daughter's. "You know what's amazing, Talia? You didn't just speak for Darnell. You spoke for every kid who's ever been scared to tell the truth because they thought no one would listen." Talia's lip trembled a little. "It didn't feel brave. It just felt scary." Camille smiled. "That's what bravery really feels like." For a moment, they sat there in silence. Just the sound of the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking softly above them. Outside, the storm had passed, and the late afternoon light made everything glow a little warmer. Talia finally said, "Mom, do you think people will forget about it?" Camille looked out the window. "Some will. Most do. But the ones who were paying attention, the ones who felt it, they'll remember. Because truth doesn't fade, even when people try to bury it." Later that night, as the news anchor recapped the week's events, the footage played again. The slap, the silence, and then Camille walking into that courtroom. This time, though, people weren't watching with outrage. They were watching with reflection. Parents turned to their kids and said, "If you ever see something wrong, speak up." Teachers reminded their students that courage isn't about winning, it's about trying when it matters. And somewhere, another little girl saw Talia's story and whispered to herself, "I'd do that too." A few weeks later, Camille took Talia and Darnell out for lunch at a small diner outside town. The owner comped their meals. A few strangers came by their table and said, "We're proud of you." Camille just smiled politely, letting her daughter take it in. For once, the world wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. As they drove home, Talia looked out the window. "Mom?" "Yeah, baby? You think it's okay to be scared, even if you're doing the right thing?" Camille looked over at her daughter, proud. "That's the only way to know you're doing the right thing." The car rolled through the quiet streets, the sunset painting the sky orange and gold. The kind of light that makes you believe, even for a second, that maybe the world can fix itself. One truth at a time. Because what started as one frightened girl's testimony had become something much bigger. A reminder that courage doesn't come from power or titles or badges. It comes from the heart. And sometimes, all it takes is one voice. Small, trembling, but honest, to shake the entire system. So, if you're watching this right now, and you've ever stayed quiet because you were scared no one would listen, this is your sign. Speak up, stand tall, even if your voice shakes, because truth, once spoken, has a way of echoing further than fear ever could. And maybe that's what real strength looks like, not silence, but courage in motion.